and the slides that I go over are the slides that you will see. And then after we're done, then we'll go into the visual body for a little bit if you guys would like to. So I'm recording now and I will get started. Good evening, everyone. We'll start with the respiratory system. This is part of your laboratory exam number 3. Let me get my pointer. So the function of the respiratory system is in the exchange of gases, right? You have the exchange of oxygen and used up oxygen in the form of carbon dioxide. So you breathe carbon dioxide out, and then you breathe oxygen-rich air in, and then that goes into the lungs, and in the lungs is where the transformation happens, and the oxygen binds to the blood cells and goes into the heart, and then via the aorta through the rest of your body. Okay, so this has to do with the regulation of the pH. This here says production of sound. I'm not sure that's what we want, unless it's the production of sound in the heart, right? But that's the only thing. So the functional division, we have the conducting portion, which means the air and the lungs, right? The air exchange in the lungs. And then we have the respiratory portion, which means the exchange of gases between the lungs and the blood. The conducting portion happens in the nose, in the nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx, down to the trachea, separated into the bronchi, into the bronchioles, and into the lungs, right? So conducting is kind of like, think of it as a train railway, right? Or how the air circulates. So we said nose, nasal cavity, down the pharynx, into the larynx, trachea, bronchi, right, dividing into the bronchi, and then the air gets into the lungs. Again, this is called the conducting portion. The respiratory portion happens in the lungs themselves. So the lungs have these little particles which are called the alveoli, right, tiny particles, and that change from carbon dioxide to, carbon dioxide you breathe out, oxygen-rich air you breathe in. That is called the respiratory portion of breathing. We already said nose, external nares, nasal cavity, right? Got this. So this just breaks it down. This is more of a theoretical part, but it breaks it down to you what it does. So nasal septum is highly vascular. Vascular means you have a lot of blood vessels, right? Blood vessels, I should leave it like that. And then the nasal conchae filter the air, and they create the meatus, and it increases the surface area where the air can touch the mucus layer, and then it warms it and it humidifies the incoming air. So you want warm, humidified incoming air. In the nasal cavity on the bottom, we have the bony hard palate, and then the internal nares all the way through the soft palate is the conducting portion. So this is what it looks like. So you breathe in through the external nares, through the nasal cavity. Right here, you have the superior meatus. It's kind of like an enclave, then the middle meatus and the inferior meatus. All of those increase the surface area of air that touches the inside of the nasal cavity and warms and filters. Yep. All right, so again, this is what they look like. The meatus, right here. Let me see. Get one that has everything labeled right away. So, oops, sorry. So here we go. So the middle nasal meatus, right, and then the inferior nasal meatus is here. The conchae are the things that is actually bulging out, and then the middle nasal meatus. The nasal septum divides the nose into a left and a right portion. Okay, so the conducting portion. So the sinus is aligned with mucosal epithelium. They moisten and warm the air. We have maxillary, ethmoidal, sphenoidal, and frontal. sinuses, and they go through the pharynx, which we start with the nasopharynx, go up higher, right? So from the internal soft nares down to the soft palate, the air goes down the oropharynx, is where the oral cavity meets the nasal cavity. So from the soft palate to the level of the hyoid bone or your Adam's apple, and then down from the hyoid bone to the beginning of the esophagus. Right? So continuing the conducting portion is again the pharynx into the larynx. Right? So here's a great image: nasopharynx, oropharynx, and 3 is the larynx. Oh. Okay, here's another image of how the air circulates. So when you study for this, guys, I need you to envision how the air circulates. So you need to envision how it goes through, and that will help you. Okay, and then from the larynx or the voice box down the bronchi and the bronchioles. So larynx connects the laryngopharynx with the trachea, has 9 hyaline cartilages, which we studied, 1 elastic cartilage, and the vocal cords. Okay, the larynx, thyroid cartilage, cricoid cartilages, 1 cricoid cartilage, and then 2 of each arytenoid, corticulate, and coliform cartilages. Okay. The epiglottis is elastic. It covers the glottis. So it covers it, and it's we have the vestibular folds and the vocal cords. Okay, so we'll look at this in just a second. So here you see the hyoid bone, yes, and then the beneath is the thyroid gland right here. And then we said 2 of each. So here on the back, on the very, it looks like a piece of corn. That's how I remembered it. So corniculate cartilage, piece of corn. Then arytenoid cartilage is beneath. And the tracheal cartilage doesn't go all the way around. Yeah, it forms like a C-shaped ring. And okay, so our arytenoid, corniculate, and then cricoid cartilage. You only have 1 of those. Here's the thyroid cartilage, right? It's open in the back. And then the epiglottis in the back, right? So epiglottis right here. So this is the posterior view. The epiglottis closes the glottis. Okay, so here's the corn. See the piece of corn, so corniculate, and then in front of the corneiform cartilage, so you have 2 of each. Beneath is arytenoid, cricoid is the first and the largest one, and then they're small. Okay, so here's a great picture. You have the vestibular folds on the outside. So the folds are on the outside, right? So these are your vocal cords. Vocal cords are here. Sometimes singers have to get them scraped or something to keep their voices nice and crisp. And then the glottis inside. Okay, so the conducting portion is, again, we are continuing now in the the bronchial tree. Starts with the trachea. It brings the warm air now. It's filtered warm air from the larynx to the bronchi. It's anterior to the esophagus. You can feel, can be palpated. So I told you it's made of C-shaped cartilage rings, and that's very useful in case something gets stuck in it. You can get it out. And it's connected by the trachealis muscle, which connects the open side of the tracheal cartilage. So if you want to see that again, right here. So these are C-shaped. And then this muscle right here is the trachealis muscle. It's very interesting. Okay, so the trachea ends in the carina. Carina is where it splits. So you have your left and right bronchi after you see the carina. So this right here will be number 3. Number 3 is what we call the carina. So that's the point of separation into the left bronchus and the right bronchus. And you see that one lung is different than the other one. The right lung has 3 lobes, the left lung has only 2 lobes, and then it's larger in comparison. And the reason why is because over here, your mediastinum is where your heart goes. Okay, so left primary bronchus, primary because it's the first split. Okay, this is the right primary bronchus. So the first time it's split, remember this, it's primary. The second time it's secondary, and after that it's tertiary. So it's secondary only for a very little while. Okay, so C-shaped cartilage in the trachea. Up here is the larynx, right, where voice box is. Then this is the carina right here. You can see it slightly under the slide. Primary bronchus on the left side, primary bronchus on the right side. Remember, left and right is reversed in the medical field. And the diaphragm, which is the muscle we use to breathe, is right underneath your lungs. Okay, this is what it looks like. Transverse plane, so if you cut it through, here's the trachealis muscle, here's the C shape, it doesn't go all the way around, the esophagus is beneath. So this is where the food comes in, and this is where the air comes in. And sometimes, food goes into the wrong pipe. That's because the epiglottis didn't do what it was supposed to do, or you were talking and eating at the same time. The bronchial tree, again, consists of the primary bronchi. We have a right primary bronchus, a left primary bronchus, and each serves its respective lung. Okay, so it goes into the secondary lung. So now in orange, you see the secondary bronchi. I told you those are very short. So this is the primary, and then it splits. See how it's split here? So it splits once, which is just this short stem right here. So this is secondary. And once it splits again, now it's actually tertiary. So in actuality, this little black line is wrong, right? It should point further up. And then this one here is still secondary, right? Because it didn't split again. Same thing here. So this is your primary, and then as soon as it splits, this is your secondary, right? And then it split. This is still your secondary, and then this points somewhere else, right? All right. So secondary. So there's 3 secondary on the right side and 2 secondary on the left side. And let's see what else we can find. Tertiary bronchi, everything else. So for the test, remember tertiary or segmental is the same thing. So they serve, of course, in the breathing, air comes in and out. And tertiary bronchi do not divide into quaternary, they divide into bronchioles. So let's those bronchioles, they serve the lobule. Each bronchiole serves a lobule, and they're divided into terminal or final bronchioles. So terminal bronchioles are branched into respiratory bronchioles, which happens in the respiratory zone. And let's look at that right here. This is a very fine image. You have the trachea. Remember, this point of division is called the carina. Then we turn into primary bronchioles, and then this small section right here is a secondary bronchiole. In this area, it's a little larger secondary bronchiole. You go from these cartilaginous rings into just plates, right? So you still have cartilage because it's protecting it, and then it divides into tertiary bronchioles, and then even smaller ones, and then into the terminal bronchioles. And hopefully I didn't overwhelm you with too much. So terminal bronchioles, and then the respiratory bronchiole is the smallest possible bronchiole, which ends in the alveolar sac, and this is where magic happens. Okay, so terminal bronchioles, branch into respiratory bronchioles. Basically everything that I said, except you have it here in written form. Um, Alveolar sacs. Let's discuss those. Alveolar sacs are clusters of alveoli. They look like grapes. They actually look like grape clusters. So you need to know it's simple squamous alveolar epithelium or cells and simple squamous blood capillaries. So it's the simplest, thinnest possible cell tissue you can get known to man, right? So here are the terminal bronchioli. Here are here are the alveolar clusters and the alveolar sacs. So let's look at that. See, alveolar sac, and then do not get confused by that, okay? So alveolar cluster sac, nobody's going to be out there to trick you when one starts and when the other one finishes. Remember, a sac, this is what it looks like. So again, this is where breathing happens. Yeah, you have the alveolar ducts. Those are the longer ones. Yeah, the lines don't directly show things very well, but and then the capillaries, the blue and red blood vessels depict oxygen poor and oxygen rich blood. So the blue veins bring blood to the alveolar sacs and you breathe out. You breathe bad air out, right? Carbon dioxide rich air and oxygen poor air out. And then you breathe in oxygen rich air in, and then that oxygen rich air that you breathe in here combines, goes immediately into the capillaries and goes up into your heart and keeps the rest of you very happy. So here we go. So remember, you have lots of cartilage, then you have cartilage rings, then you have cartilage plates, and the smaller you go down, tertiary bronchioles, almost no cartilage and much more muscle, right? So we're dealing much more with muscle. Okay, so the respiratory portion, respiratory zone of your system are the lungs. They're located in your upper body in the thoracic cavity, separated by the heart and the mediastinum, as we looked at, and they're covered by a membrane, which is called a pleura or pleura. And this is the tissue is looks like serous, right? But serous membrane. And you need to know that all pleuras in the body have two layers, all of them. There is a parietal pleura, and then there is a visceral pleura. So the parietal is on the outside, right? It's the outermost membrane, and that lines the cavity itself. And then the visceral covers the organ itself. You have it on the heart, you have it on all your organs, right? So that's what happens. Remember, the pleura is a like protective membrane. It consists of two layers, parietal, visceral, and in the middle is usually a fluid. So that fluid keeps the two layers from having too much friction, and it's called right here pleural fluid. I'm sure it's called something else that you will study in medical school, but for our purposes, it's the fluid and pleura. Okay, so the respiratory portion, continuing lungs, divided into 3 lobes on the right and 2 lobes on the left. You need to know that the left lung is smaller than the right lung, and the reason why, because the heart is leaning more towards the left. The lobes are the superior, middle, and inferior lobes on the right, and the superior and the inferior lobe on the left. Okay. On the top is what we call an apex, right? On the bottom is what we call a base. The bottom rests securely on the diaphragm. The diaphragm is the muscle beneath the lungs that contracts and expands. And then we have a cardiac notch, which is a surface on the left lining. You'll see that, and hilum. So let's look at the hilum. Okay, so cardiac notch, and then we'll talk about the hilum. You can't see it. So the right lung, superior, middle, inferior lobe. The left lung, superior and inferior lobe. Okay, very good. cardiac notch right here. This is where the heart goes. Okay, this is where the heart goes. And then one more thing, you have a base right here, or an apex. A. Think about the ABC, right? So A comes before B, and then the base is on the bottom. All right. So this is where you see the hilus. See? So hilus is the entry and exit point of blood vessels. Every organ has that, right? The kidneys have it. Every organ has the hilus. So this is what it looks like. And this is where you see your arteries and your veins and, your lymph coming in and out. Okay. All right, so this is what you need to know from the outside. Remember, on a quiz, you can see something like this and something's pointing to it. Also, what helps me remember it, parietal and visceral. I remember P goes before V, so P is on the outside, right? V is on the inside. So P lines actually the cavity itself, and then visceral lines the organ, but since we just removed the organ, it looks like they're both laying on top of each other, which in a case, no way they are. So this space right here is the pleural cavity, and inside you have the pleural fluid. All right. This is us looking up. So this is a cadaver that's cut in half, and we're looking from the diaphragm up, right? Here's the artery, and here's the vein, and then we just removed the diaphragm. So this is what it looks like. It's really amazing. Here's the right lung, because this is the backbone, right? Our right is the body's right, and then there's the left lung. Remember, parietal is lining the cavity, right? Parietal pleura, and visceral is lining the organ itself. Okay, so let's look at the microscopic anatomy. You have the nasal cavity, paranasal sinuses, and nasopharynx. Remember, pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium. Why is it stratified ciliated? Because it has to pick up all the junk from the atmosphere. So the dust, the pollen, whatever we're breathing in, the cilia is like little brushes, right? And they grab the stuff that comes in and it comes back out. Sometimes you react with, you have to sneeze, sometimes you have to blow your nose, sometimes you have to cough it up. And sometimes you don't even know. So these things work incredibly hard. The cilia, we should give more credit to the cilia. So here are the cilia, here are the goblets in purple, see? And then columnar, it's really tall. So everything that does a lot of work is really tall, and with regards to cells. All right. And then let's talk about what happens back closer, the throat, oropharynx, laryngopharynx, larynx, everything above the vocal cords. It is stratified squamous. Okay, so we lost the cilia, right? Because at this point, it's stratified, which means it's not just one, different things, squamous, and of course it's not keratin. Keratin only needs to be on the skin. All right, and then going down, we are back to pseudostratified, and we have cilia and columnar epithelium. So back to cilia in the larynx. Okay, in the secondary tertiary bronchi, columnar, there's few cilia, and it goes all the way to no cilia. All right, so the end of tertiary bronchi, bronchioles, beginning of the respiratory bronchioles is simple cuboidal, no cilia. And the respiratory alveolar duct, simple squamous. Here we go. So here's the esophagus, right? This is where the food comes in and out. So this can collapse, right? It can collapse. It doesn't necessarily keep its shape. But because of the cartilage that you have around your trachea, the lumen of the trachea stays open, right? You need it to stay open. You never need this to collapse, right? The trachealis muscle goes around the cartilage. And then we have the epithelial lining of the trachea that protects it. Okay, so here's a bronchial, terminal bronchial, the smallest bronchial here. Here's a blood vessel, and it's a lot, right? Here are the bubbles. So here are the clusters in a cross section. These are your alveolar sacs, alveoli, and then it is simple squamous epithelium, right? They're the simplest, thinnest in the alveolar ducts that you can get. Okay, so here are images of alveoli. Beautiful. It almost looks like it almost looks like fat tissue, right? But it's not. This is alveoli. So here you go. Lots of alveoli. And here is the body, right? One lung. So this would be, if this is the spine, if the head is on the opposite side. So this would be the right lung, right? It's larger. See how much larger it is? The left lung is smaller. And if you say this is the heart, then you guess correctly. It's in the mediastinum. See, so the left lung makes way to the large heart. And remember, the heart is the size of a fist, so it's pretty large. All right, again, the vocal cords right here. And that's it. Oh, again, here's the epiglottis. See the epiglottis? So the epiglottis, here's the glottis. The epiglottis is supposed to cover the glottis. So that means that food goes where food needs to go and air goes where air needs to go. But the older you get, unfortunately, this thing doesn't always do what it's supposed to do, especially if you eat popcorn, right? Or in the movie theater. So stuff gets stuck, food gets stuck behind, doesn't close right, and you have all kinds of issues. Okay, so this was the respiratory. Go back. The respiratory. The next one is the digestive, and then we'll finish with the lymphatic. So let's go back to. Okay, 96 slides. Here we come. The alimentary canal, right? It starts with the oral cavity and ends at the anus. So the alimentary canal is the whole shebang. Start the mouth and where it comes out. Okay, so the function of the digestive system is manifold, right? It's ingestion, secretion, mixing of food, propulsing through the esophagus, then the stomach, then the duodenum, then the small intestine, then the large intestine, the digestion of nutrients or digestion of food, the absorption of nutrients, and then what you don't need is defecation. And I'm reading a book right now, and it says that humans produce 600,000 kilograms of waste in their lifetime. That's about 1,200,000 pounds. All right, so the function of the digestive system is chemical and mechanical digestion. So let's get started. We start with the oral cavity, then the oral pharynx, esophagus goes down into the stomach, right? The stomach is met by HCl acid, goes into the small intestine, then into the large intestine or colon, and then there are three sides to the large intestine: the ascending, transverse, and descending, down the rectum and out the anus. Okay, so food comes in through the mouth into the oral cavity, then into the pharynx, from the pharynx into the esophagus. And in the pharynx, that's where trouble can happen that I told you. The older we get, or maybe you laugh, you eat, and you eat and talk at the same time, and stuff gets down the wrong pipe, right? But ideally, it would come down the esophagus into the stomach, right here, and then from the stomach into the duodenum, small intestine, then the large intestine, and out the rectum, and then the anus. All right. The accessory glands, very important. First of all, we need salivary glands that get everything moving. Then we have the liver, which is the laboratory of your body. Then the gallbladder. The gallbladder helps especially with fatty foods. And then the pancreas with all the enzymes and hormones it produces. So the salivary glands. In your mouth, we have a couple salivary glands. And then the liver, which I said was the laboratory. And the small but very important bladder is the gallbladder that helps us with fatty foods and the pancreas. Okay, so here's an image of a cadaver. So you see the small intestine. You see a little bit of the large intestine right here, descending colon. You don't see the other parts right now. You see, oh, yes, it's just really large. Oh my goodness, this is the transverse colon. Yeah, and that's all you need to know right now. This is mainly the small intestine, and then the colon kind of wraps around it like a U-shaped thing. All right. So the tissues of the alimentary canal are in the esophagus, stomach, and in the intestines. Then we have three layers. We have the mucosa, the submucosa, and the muscularis externa. We also have a layer that's called the sexa, and that's the visceral layer of the peritoneum. I'm not really sure what's going on, but I'm hearing myself twice. Okay, so let's look at the lumen of where the food goes through here. So on the outside is the serosa. So remember that's the visceral protective layer. Then we have the muscularis externa right here, the submucosa, the mucosa, right? So inside out, mucosa, submucosa, and muscularis, and then protected by the visceral layer, which is the serosa. Okay, there it is. Here we know that mucosa is simple columnar, the connective tissue, submucosa, smooth muscle, of course, is the muscularis, and then connective tissue is the serous layer. Again, same image. Let's talk about the mesenteries. So we have a couple of mesenteries. One of them is the peritoneum. Peritoneum is a complex membrane. We have the visceral and parietal. Remember how I told you everything has two layers, visceral and parietal. Every organ, everything that needs to be protected. So visceral covers the organ itself. Parietal covers actually the cavity. And then in between is the peritoneal fluid, or yes, whatever the fluid is called. It's usually based on the organ it covers. So here's the fluid. So the peritoneal fluid is found in the peritoneal cavity between the two peritoneal layers. Okay, so here we go. If you look, here's the parietal peritoneum. Okay, the visceral covers the organ. The parietal covers the cavity. And here's the peritoneal cavity right here. So that's the in between those two layers. We'll see some more images soon. So the mesentery, the peritoneum is a complex membrane. It keeps the organs together, which is awesome. So things don't just kind of smoosh around. They stay together in a certain order. And it does not envelop the duodenum, the kidneys, and the pancreas. Right? So here's the duodenum. Let's see. Kind of hard to see, but here are the retroperitoneal organs. Those are not covered by the visceral peritoneum. See, so it kind of goes around, excludes those. Okay, so we already know that the peritoneum is a complex membrane. And then let's talk about some of the folds. Let's talk about two folds specifically. We have a fatty tissue fold that kind of folds over like an apron over the large and the small intestine from the top. It's called the greater omentum. And then the lesser omentum, same tissue, connects the medial curve of the stomach to the liver. So let's see what this will look like. So the lesser omentum, right here. And then the greater omentum is this large thing, like an apron. It just kind of lays on top of your large and your small omentum. Yeah? Okay. And then the folds are the mesocolon, the falciform ligament, and the mesentery. So let's discuss this. Mesocolon holds large intestines to the abdominal wall, to the posterior abdominal wall. And the falciform ligament holds liver, right, to the abdominal wall, to the front abdominal wall. And then the mesentery holds small intestine to posterior wall. So as far as my test is concerned, you need to be able to point those out, but not necessarily the function, yeah? That's more theory. So mesocolon is over here, mesentery is over here, and greater omentum we already studied. That's the apron-like. Okay. Here's the apron-like omentum or the greater omentum. Yeah. Here's the falciform ligament. It holds things to the back, right? And then the lesser omentum is, see how we lifted the liver and the gallbladder, so it holds things to the back wall. Okay. If you pull the small intestines out, you will see the mesocolon here, and which is part of the mesentery. Okay, remember, transverse colon, descending colon, and then in the back here's the ascending colon. Okay, so this is a beautiful picture of the stomach. Remember the fundus, the body, the pyloric region, lesser omentum, right? Smaller curve has the lesser omentum. Larger curve has the greater omentum. This is definitely on your test. Okay, but remember, all you need for my class is to point it out. Greater omentum is here, okay? And then the tissue underneath is the mesocolon. I don't need to tell you, this is on the test, right? The colon, the large colon that goes from left to right here is called the transverse colon. Okay. Oops, sorry. So here's a great image of the liver. The liver has four lobes, right? We have the left lobe. Remember, we are looking up, right? So this is looking down at us. Left lobe is the small one. Then the one that's square, quadrate lobe, and the one that's also square but bigger is the quadrate lobe right here. And then this is the fundus of the gallbladder, the body of the gallbladder, the neck of the gallbladder. This is on the test, common bile duct, hepatic vein right here. And then the inferior cava comes down. And then remember this, falciform ligament. Falciform means wrong or false. And it connects this liver to the back of the abdominal cavity. So left lobe, quadrate lobe, quadrate lobe. Let's talk about the oral cavities. So the outer opening is the labia, or the lips. You have upper lips and lower lips. The roof of the oral cavity consists of the hard palate, the soft palate, and the vestibule. So the vestibule is the space between your lips and your teeth. The tongue is attached to the bottom of your mouth by the lingual frenulum, and the gums or the gingiva surround the teeth. So frenulum, I don't think we see it, is right here. Right? Sometimes it's more attached in infants and it's cut easy, quickly. This is the vestibule, is the space between the teeth and the lips. Then this is the lower lips and the upper lips. Here's the uvula, right? That's the thing that hangs down in the middle. Cheekbones, soft palate is further behind, the hard palate closer to the front. The tongue is lifted up here. And then sometimes you can see the tonsils on the side. We used to think that there was no function for the tonsils. And now we see that they're actually very, very, very important for the immune system. And okay, and actually now we hardly ever remove the tonsils because of their importance. So if you lift your tongue, you can spray some saliva, right? Because your salivary glands are down here. And let's look at it. So first comes the hard palate, then comes the soft palate, and then down here hangs the uvula. This is your tongue. It has a little L here. The opening, this whole thing here is the oral cavities. You have several tonsils. So you have lingual tonsils right here, and you have pharyngeal tonsils. And then I think there's a third set, but I don't see it right here. So, and then this is the oral pharynx, right? So this is the pharynx meets the oral cavity. Okay, so right here, oopsie. Okay, right here is the oropharynx. Here are the vocal folds. So larynx, pharynx, and we don't have the epiglottis right here, right? But it should, the epiglottis closes down when you eat and food goes down this way. So you see how close it is together? That's why sometimes when you eat popcorn or you eat something that can get stuck or nuts or something, this thing has trouble and you kind of keep coughing and then hopefully it doesn't fall in here or here because then you can stop coughing. Okay, so see, I covered everything here. Okay, so let's talk about the tongue, right? So the tongue, you need to know the papillae. So you have circumvallate papillae, right? And piliform and fungiform papillae. So these are your taste buds. The stomach is a muscular organ. You have 3 layers. You have the muscle, you have longitudinal and circular and oblique muscles. Wow, surprised. Yeah, you need this, but you need to know this. So here we go. Here's the stomach. Here's the esophagus coming in, duodenum coming out. Here's your stomach. So remember, you have longitudinal layers. See the orange stuff? That's important. Then you have the circular layers, goes around. And then you have the oblique muscle, right? And if you remember, here is the lesser curvature, lesser omentum. Here's the greater curvature, and it's protected by the greater omentum. Inside the stomach, you have these rugae or these folds, right? So again, they increase the surface area, and as food is getting digested. So let's look again. Here's the longitudinal muscles, oblique muscles, and circular muscles. All right, we talked about that. Right here is the pyloric sphincter. Up here is the esophageal sphincter. So remember, esophageal sphincter is where the esophagus enters the stomach, and then the pyloric sphincter is where the stomach leaves its contents through the pyloric sphincter into the duodenum. Duodenum means 12. Duo is 2, denum or de means 10, so 12. So the duodenum is about as long as 12 fingers, one next to the other. Just a little side note. The stomach is divided into 4 parts: the cardia, the fundus, the body, and the pyloric region. Let's look at those. So the fundus is here. The cardia is where the esophagus meets the stomach. The body is the largest part, And then the pyloric region. So this is where the pyloric sphincter is, the pyloric atrium, and then the pyloric canal, right? So a lot of things called pyloric, but really it's the bottom part. Here's another picture, the fundus, the body, the pyloric region of pylorus, and then off into the duodenum it goes. All right, so the layer of the mucosa. The lining is simple columnar epithelium. It's folded into rugae, and they're non-permanent folds, so things move. And then as the more food you put in, the rugae will expand. So here are the rugae, right? So these are the folds. Again, the rugae, see? So the more you eat, the bigger your stomach gets, and the rugae disappear. This is cut open stomach of a cadaver. So you see the esophagus, this is where food comes in. This is the cardiac region, the fundus, the body, the pyloric atrium, pyloric region, pyloric sphincter. Do you see the muscle? You should see it really well. So this is a great functioning pyloric sphincter that we have here, and the duodenum, or it was, right, at some point. So here's a cartoon image. Okay, let's go into the intestines. We have two types of intestines. We have small intestines and we have large intestines. The small intestines are very, very long, and they have three parts. They start with the duodenum, then they go into jejunum, and then eventually into the ileum. The large intestine is when the ileum joins the ascending colon, goes into the transverse colon, and down into the descending colon. So let's look at that. Here's a part of the duodenum. So what's attached on the duodenum is the stomach. If you guessed it correctly, good. Duodenum goes into the right here, small intestine. So this is the J, the jejunum. Then into the ileum, right? So duodenum, jejunum goes into the ileum. Ileum goes into the ascending colon up here, transverse colon, and down the descending colon into the rectum and out of the anus. Right? So stomach, duodenum, small intestine. The small intestine starts with the jejunum, ends in the ileum. I'm sorry, the small intestine starts with the duodenum, continues into the jejunum, transfers into the ileum, into the ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon, out the rectum, or through the rectum, out the anus. It is lined with simple columnar epithelium. Duodenum, jejunum, ileum. Ileum is the longest, and it ends in the ileocecal sphincter, which we will look at closely. It has permanent folds. They're called plica circularis, and let's look at those. So here's your small intestine. Ileum is here. It starts, remember, duodenum, then jejunum, then ileum. But here's one of those permanent folds. So these don't go away. They're called plica circularis or circularis. And of course, every organ has a serosa, right? Remember, parietal and visceral serosa. Okay, so plica circularis, this is what it looks like. If you cut the small intestine, you see these permanent folds. So here's the mucosa layer, right? So remember, this is that special mucosal cell. And then on top is the submucosa, and then we followed by the muscularis externa, which is a circular muscle, followed by a longitudinal muscle, which is the muscularis externa as well, and then the serous layer. So we need all of these muscles and this fold to propulse our food through the body. The large intestine extends from the cecum to the anus. So the cecum is the near end or the proximal end, and the ileocecal valve is the junction with the ileum of the small intestine to the large intestine. And then we have something that's called an appendix, right? You all heard appendicitis. It's also called the very vermiform appendix. Let's take a quick look. and it hurts really bad. You get appendicitis, so it's this right here. And at this point, we really don't know what the function is, except to give us a lot of pain. So from the ileum, small intestine, there's an ileocecal valve right here. So the contents of your food come from the small intestine into the large intestine, up the ascending colon, through the transverse colon, down the descending colon, and then over here we will describe the side 22, describe it just a little bit, down the rectum, out the anus. All right, so the ascending colon goes up, right? It ends at the hepatic flexure. So hepatic means this is where your liver is. That's why we call it according to the hepar, or liver, according to the organ. And then the transverse colon goes straight across from left to right of your body. Right. From right to left of your body to the splenic flexure, because that's where your spleen is. And then the descending color ends with the sigmoid colon at the rectum. So let's look again. Ascending colon, this turn right here, and this turn right here can give us, and this one can give us trouble, but especially this one and this one. That's why often if you have stomach problem, we say stomach problem, but intestinal problem, a good massage here and here will alleviate it, and we'll get the fecal matter back moving. So ascending colon, hepatic flexure, because this is where your liver is. Transverse colon, spleen is on this end, so splenic flexure, down the descending colon, through the sigmoid colon. So now we gave this area a name. So see, it's nice and wide, so it kind of gain some momentum here through the rectum and out the anus. All right, so the longitudinal muscle layer forms 3 bands. They're called Tenier coli, and each pound is called a haustra. Okay, so let's talk about the lipid pouches and about the Tenier coli. So see this right here? Right? You can see it this way. So this is the Tenier coli. Yeah? And then each one of these pouches, lipid pouches, is called a haustra. Like think of a house. Okay. All right, let's see. So here's a picture of a haustra. Right, so ascending colon, hepatic flexure, transverse colon, descending colon. Remember, this is on the test, Tenier coli. See it? Right here's a beautiful picture. So three layers of muscle. Okay, so here's a haustra. And here you're, remember, mucosa, submucosa, circular muscle, sometimes more than 1 layer, and then the serosa, which is divided into, yes, you guessed it, 2 layers, parietal and visceral. All right, the rectum ends at the anal canal, then comes the anal canal, which is the last 2 to 3 centimeters, so about 1.5 inches of your digestive tract. And then the anus is it, that's the end. It has smooth muscle layer. It has 2 sphincters. One is internal and one is external. One is involuntary and one is voluntary. So here is the rectum. Here's the anal canal. See, very short. Now let me show you the 2 sphincters. So the internal, right? Internal, and then the external, and together they in unison. Okay, let's talk about accessory structures, salivary glands, teeth, liver, pancreas. Okay, so let's talk about the parotid ducts. They're near the second molars, so they secrete saliva. You have the submandibular ducts and the sublingual ducts. I don't know what's going on with my PowerPoint. Hopefully yours doesn't have these issues. So let's look at it. So parotid ducts are here, see it? So this is the parotid. Sometimes you can feel it. Parotid duct. Here's the spit right here. So submandibular glands, submandibular duct, and then sublingual. Under your tongue, you have the salivary glands. Here is the opening of the salivary glands. Okay, let's talk about the tooth. The tooth can be divided into the crown, the neck, and the root. Note that the crown consists of the enamel and the dentin. The neck is where the tooth hits the gingiva, and then the root is where most of the tooth is at. So what you have here, this gray line right here, that is called the cementum. That's what keeps the tooth attached in the mouth to the bone, right? And then we have the periodontal ligaments. They connect the cementum to the actual bone. Yeah? Let's see, gingiva, pulp cavity, pulp, root canals, apical foramen. Okay, so at the opening here, here's the apical foramen, blood layers, blood vessels, root canal. Here are the teeth. You have 4 incisors, 2 cuspids, 4 premolars, and 6 molars. All right, here are the molars, premolars, incisors, and the same on the other side. Okay, here's one of our models. Okay. All right, so here's a close-up. Okay, pulp cavity. Here's the root. '23 is the cementum, and then the ligaments would be the red would be your 26. Okay. All right. So the liver. The large organ that lies lower than the diaphragm, beneath the diaphragm, has 2 main lobes, the right and the left, and it has 2 smaller lobes, the caudate and the quadrate. So here's the liver. Left lobe is smaller, right lobe is larger. On top is the caudate, and the larger smaller one is the quadrate. Okay, here is the gallbladder. Okay, so the liver is also called hepar. An infection of the liver is hepatitis. So this is the hepatic vein, hepatic portal vein, and then the green is the common bile ducts. The liver has 70,000 functions. It is the laboratory of the body. It is amazing. Okay, so this is from the back. So left lobe, quadrate, on the bottom is the quadrate. Okay, this is looking at it anteriorly. Here's the diaphragm. So here's the right lobe, right? Even though it's reversed, you need to think that you're looking at the body. Here's the left lobe. Here's the falciform ligament. Remember, the falciform ligament keeps the liver in place and it attached to the back of the abdominal cavity. Here is the gallbladder. Common hepatic duct seems to be like on every test I ever grade. Cystic duct. Here's the pancreas. And then the duodenum empties into the ileum. Okay, so here's the common bile duct. And bile is released when we eat especially fatty food. Okay. Left lobe, so we are looking at it from a different angle now, but left lobe here is smaller, right lobe is larger. You need to know that the right lobe is larger, right? And then this is the falciform ligament, quadrate lobe, and caudate lobe. All right, oops, go back one. This is the pancreas. Okay. And the duct that goes through it is the pancreatic duct. So I will not ask you for the sphincter, but I will ask you what is this gland going through, right? And it will be the pancreatic duct. And they all work in unison. So here's the gallbladder, and stomach empties into the duodenum. Okay? And then this is an image of the duodenal ampulla, so how the bile duct exerts its bile, and it goes right as the duodenum changes into the jejunum. So it shows it comes out right here. See, right here in the back. That's how bile enters. So the pancreas composition has a head, a body, and a tail, and you have a pancreatic duct which runs from the tail, right? You showed that. Um, to the ampulla, and it secretes, of course, enzymes to the duodenum. So here it is. Here's the pancreas. Here's the pancreatic duct. Here are the enzymes that get excreted into the duodenum. So tail, body, head of the pancreas. Remember, common bile duct is on every test. All right, let's call it for tonight. So we did the digestive. Well, we did the respiratory. Okay, beautiful. I think I gave you plenty to study for. Let me stop recording.